Hello and welcome to the Arsenal BiteSize Podcast. I'm, of course, FPL Nima, and I'm joined by my co-host Clayton at Clates AFC on Twitter. We're here to review the Everton 1-0 victory against the Arsenal, Sean Dyche's first game in charge, and a bitterly disappointing result. I know, obviously, Clayton went to the match, so if you were listening to the preview episode for this game, I'm sure you can share your sympathy with him that I do of a 12-hour coach travel to see us lose our second game of the season. How was it? I guess, do you want to tell us a little bit about just like the atmosphere? Like, did it feel like it was going to be like a bogey match, like when you got there, or like was there any point at which you sensed something wasn't going to go right?
Do you know what? Funnily enough, in the warm up, yeah. So to be honest, in terms of like the whole feeling sorry for me, like after doing a shift like that, I would do it again tomorrow in a heartbeat, and I'm sure many Arsenal fans would as well, right? Like I think I said in one of the group chats we're in, like, I'm quite fortunate and very grateful that I'm getting these handful of away tickets, and like if I could know in advance I'm going to go to an away game and we're going to lose, I would still do it. Like it's just they're so different compared to going to the home games and stuff. But in terms of the actual day, yeah, unfortunately, I had to get the supporters coach because of like the train strikes and the knock-on effect, and it being a 12:30 Saturday morning kickoff, but Saturday afternoon, sorry. But yeah, the actual day was fine. Like I went on my own this time. I didn't have any friends to go with or anything. But got the coach up, got there like really early doors. I think like 10-ish we got there. And I walked around and like I didn't realize Stanley Park, literally like you walk through one end of Stanley Park, it's Goodison, you get to the other in about 10-15 minutes and it's Anfield. So that was quite cool. Just going for a little walk around. Then I went to, there was a designated Arsenal away pub. So I went in there for a bit, had a drink and stuff. And spoke to like a few random Arsenal fans and stuff. And then I don't know, like to your question, like was there ever a feeling of this being like a bogey game? Not until I got into the ground, and I'll explain why. But the pre-match vibes just weren't quite there like they usually are. Like against City in the cup, I know we lost, but like the vibe pre-match was unreal. Just concourse was bouncing, like everyone was in good song, good spirit. And I know that was a Friday night, but it was a bit flat on Saturday for me. And then even the actual away end, like I think the first 20 minutes, which coincided with when we were playing well, right? It was fine. But then there were definitely some nerves creeping in and like people were quite anxious, tense. And to the question though, on like, was there any point on the day I felt like this could be a bogey match? In the pre-match, I shit you not, in the warm-up, I never pay attention to shit like this. And I think it's because I was on my own. I went and got into my seat quite early. I usually get in just before kickoff and stuff. So I never see the warm-ups. We were fucking awful. Like, you know, when they're doing their shooting practice and stuff, like the only people that were hitting the corners were Saka and Nketiah. And I mean the corners of the net, not that the corner as in they were so wayward. But and that's where I don't know if I'm overthinking things or overanalyzing, but I feel like that translated into a lot of what we saw on the pitch and kind of like in the match, sorry, like the final ball, the final touch, this, that. And like, because I saw Xhaka and Odegaard in the warm up, they were so off it. And then, yeah, so that was the only point. Like, I never really look into that stuff. And I think partly it's because I'm never in my seat early enough to see it. But I remember when I play Sunday League and stuff, they say get it out of your system early, right? Like all of those cliches from
Yeah,
like,
all the misses out. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I don't know. Like when I was there, I was like, okay, I hope this is them getting it out of their system because they weren't quite clicking. And just basic finishing, basic touches, like the rondos and stuff. And I don't know, like, yeah, in my gut, there was an off feeling from the minute I saw that. And obviously, we'll get into a bit in terms of like why we lost and stuff. But yeah, that definitely set me up to feel like,
It
I
is
don't think this
interesting
is going
though
to.
that it was starting to feel like that once you actually saw us like preparing to get underway in the warm up and the atmosphere, as you say. I do think that obviously with the strikes on the Friday and then the difficulty for traveling fans to get to the away match as well on the day, with it being a 12:30 kickoff, early kickoff at a stadium where we've not won in the league since 2017. They've got like
Yeah.
13 out of 15 points against us or something. And then suddenly they bring in a new manager, he's only had 6 days with them. So you would hope that it wouldn't make that much of a difference. But they really looked like they were out from a physical battle point of view to dominate. Like one when I saw the midfield three in the kind of the lineups, that did worry me a bit. Like seeing just, I think it was like Decore, Gay, and Onana, and I was like, these are some strong lads, and like, what's gonna happen? Like, obviously, we normally are used to dominating in terms of overloading like numbers in the midfield with the likes of Zinchenko tucking in, but something just felt off. Like that lineup screamed to me like this is gonna be a real physical battle, and
It's
like, how are
funny.
we gonna respond to it, basically?
It's funny you had that feeling because I had the same feelings. I was sat in my seat 11:30 just refreshing Twitter and couldn't get any signal in the ground. And the guy next to me, I saw he had the lineup up. So I asked him, and then I asked him, what's the Everton one? And same as you, I saw that. I was like, oh, fucking hell. Like, so much for me going, Sean Dyche is going to go Mike Bassett 4-4 fucking 2, right? Like, complete that. Yeah. I mean, I was far too arrogant on Friday, I think, with hindsight. Like,
I
there
do
was a
wonder
few.
if the players, obviously, I think I'm really happy with like the way Arteta came out and they asked him what he said to the players. He said, I told them I love them more today
Yeah.
than before. And I think that's important, like the perspective that this was only our second league loss. You know, we've only, like the last time we lost in the league was in September at Old
I
Trafford. So
know.
I think we've got to like take some of that perspective with us when we analyze this today, I believe. It is
100%.
very upsetting, obviously. I think the weekend was made a bit better. I know we're here to talk about the, obviously, Arsenal-Everton game, but I think we have to also comment on the fact that, you know, Harry Kane got his 200th Premier League goal to beat Man City. And that perhaps like softened the blow of our loss to Everton. You know, I know if you look at City, and we're talking about bogey teams and bogey grounds, it's been 5
Spurs
matches
have a
they've played
number on
Spurs
City, right?
now. Yeah, so they've played them
Yeah.
5 times since they moved from Wembley to this new Tottenham Stadium. They scored 0 goals from nearly a 10 XG in that time.
Yeah.
And they've lost all 5 of those games. So
Can I?
thank God that happened as well, because if we were sitting here 2 points ahead, knowing we're playing City like a week tomorrow, I think I'd be a lot more stressed out and less calm than I am now.
Can I just add to that? Like, obviously, in the best interests of Arsenal Football Club, it was for City to drop points, right? And like, I think it's okay to acknowledge that Spurs winning did us a favor, but like, the fucking some people like parading as Spurs fans for the like. I found it embarrassing, like the way people
Did
were
you see
kind
some
of
of them with the Spurs emblems in their Twitter profile pics?
yeah,
And
there was
stuff?
that. There was like the hashtag of like the COYS. There was like I found it fucking embarrassing. Like if you're proper Arsenal, like yeah, I don't know. Like that's the way I summarize my feelings on that was it's in the best interest of Arsenal Football Club for City to drop points in that game. But I'm not going to go and fucking like I don't know what the word is. Like, I'm not going to go celebrate it. I'm not going to go parade that I want Tottenham to win, sort of thing. Just and even like, do you know, Josh Lane's like one of our friends on Twitter. He made a good point, which I didn't really think of it this way. It's like we want City to drop points in every game, right? It's not just against Tottenham, and I didn't really think
It's
of it
any
like that.
game. I guess it's just we
Yeah,
believe that away at Tottenham, a bogey
it's a
ground
higher
for them,
likelihood.
it's more likely. Exactly.
Yeah,
But
but
we
I
want
just
them to
wanted to,
drop points in any game. Yeah, it's not a Tottenham specific thing. Like I would
yeah,
never really want Tottenham to win.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, there's not many things that like wind me up anymore, but like that really fucking wound me up. Seeing like people twerk for Spurs, I was like, I found it embarrassing. Like, obviously, yeah, I think they did us a favor. Thank you. And I think my perspective on it is, I would love it, and it would be very poetic if Kane's record-breaking moment was an assist to Arsenal winning the title. That's the way I'm trying to think of it, rather than go on Spurs, this that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think so. I guess just a couple of quick shout outs and we'll get to the lineups. But Mike also makes a good point as well, just about City, which I'll bring up on the screen in a second. But afternoon to Mike Halpin. Good to see you, mate. And we have Pontus Johansson. Thanks for tuning in live. Sorry for moving it earlier than the 12:30 slightly. Blue Danube Joe, good to see you, mate. And then I think Mike's comment that I just wanted to pull up was that City struggled against Frank's Everton at home. So, you know, obviously, like we played them at their stadium where we do generally struggle. City played them at the Etihad and dropped points. And I don't think that gets spoken about. Yeah, so it doesn't really get spoken about, does it? And I think this narrative that, you know, Arsenal are going to drop points. Yeah, of course we will. Like, these won't be the only 2 losses we have this season. I'm pretty confident of that. I'll tell you that much. But what people don't seem to acknowledge is that City can also drop points. It just seems to be something that they don't seem to comprehend is possible. Like, I don't know why as well, because, you know, this is not the same City team. Like, something looks very off. Like when they went down against Spurs in the game where they came back from 2-0 and won 4-2 a few weeks ago, it felt like City could come back into that game. Yesterday, even once De Bruyne came on, the only chance I remember that was close was Mahrez hitting the post or the bar. So
Yeah.
like, it didn't ever feel like City got a foothold in that game. And actually, even after De Bruyne came on, the most threatening chances in that game seemed to be Spurs on the counter for the rest of the half an hour. So I think definitely like that tells you that things aren't quite clicking. You know, Pep's come out with more of his mind game quotes since the game. One of the things he said is like, we were not in a position to be talking about championships.
Oh, really?
Like, and I'm
I've
like,
not
mate,
seen much of the
I'm like,
post
mate,
stuff.
like, I'm familiar with your game, Pep. I know this game. It's called a mind game, and we're not going to fall for that. But he's basically just saying, like, yeah, like, we're in no position to be competing for a title. Like, everything's a mess. Did you see he went off on a Klopp-like rant? I don't know if you saw this,
About the
but
travel.
it was epic, right? Did you see that? It was
Is it
honestly
about
one of the
the
funniest.
time?
Yeah, about how long it
Yeah.
takes to travel to London.
How fucking tone deaf is he when like you have fans getting fucked over by the train companies, like, and traveling up and down the country, and his like elite team are sat on this absolute comfort luxury coach. Like the tone deafness, I was like, what the fuck? But yeah,
For the
he's losing
podcast
his
listeners,
marbles, isn't he?
yeah. For the podcast listeners, the exact quote was, he said, coming from Manchester to London, it's like going to Northern Europe. It's 4 hours, 20 minutes to get to a hotel. It's so exhausting. I'm sorry. And I was just like, but it took you longer to go from Barcelona to Madrid when you were managing in La Liga. So, like, what's the next quote that's going to come out in 3 weeks? Arsenal
Honestly.
have an advantage because they get to play more London derbies. Is that the next bloody moment where he loses his marbles? So, I think he's definitely getting rattled, as Mike says, once he starts talking about travel times. There's definitely something not quite right there. We know a few players want out in the summer. There's rumors of the likes of
Yeah.
Laporte. So I think it's Laporte, Gundogan, Bernardo
Bernardo.
Silva, Walker. There are quite a few. Like, you know, Foden's not been playing. I understand he's injured, but, you know, at some point, like, if you're not playing at all and you're that level of player, like, can you stay long term?
Yeah.
We know the new. We won't talk about. We'll go on to this match now, but just a final thought. Obviously, investigations have begun from an independent, you know, non-Premier League affiliated regulatory body and lawyer into 9 years of financial breaches.
Yeah,
So
that's mad.
that's obviously something that, you know, they're going to be concerned about and trying to protect their brand image. You got to think about their owners. This is like a nation state's brand image on the line too, not just the club. Like, they are going to hire some expensive lawyers. So I'm sure we'll talk about
Do you remember
that in
that
future
clip
weeks.
of like the army of lawyers that were walking around the last? It was like the Avengers popped up for them.
Exactly. I think the key thing I noticed for anyone who hasn't seen it is that it appears that the way they got out of the last one from UEFA, there was like a kind of a technicality, and it was basically like, you got this evidence illegally, so you can't use it, and then they were able to appeal their way out. This time, it feels like they have a lot more on them. They've spent years. The Premier League is much more powerful, I think, and on top of that, it appears that there is no appeal process. So, like, whatever they get told, like, that's kind of it. Like, they can't go into appeal hell. I don't think it will be resolved this year. I think that's a key thing to add. Like, this is, if it's taken 3-4 years to gather this, you know, it's going to take a long time to get to a conclusion. So anyone who thinks they're going to drop points this season and be docked points, like, I would probably park that enthusiasm and accept that A, it's not going to happen, and B, the last thing I want is Arsenal to win a Premier League title and be told, oh, there's an asterisk, you only won it because City were docked points. So I'd like us to just win this on our merit, and that's just one thing I thought I'd put out there with that news in mind. So let's go to the lineup and let's
we can't procrastinate anymore, can we?
We tried to avoid talking about this Everton game and all the positives of everything that's been going wrong at City, but now we need to accept what went wrong for us on Saturday at 12:30 in the 1-0 defeat. I don't think anyone played well on the day, if I'm completely honest. I think it's unfair to single out any particular player and kind of scapegoat them. I saw a few people doing that in the fan base. I think when the whole team performs so under par, you just got to accept it's a bad day in the office and these things happen, and it's how we bounce back now. And hopefully we bounce back like we did against United, and not like last season where we used to go on 2-3 game losing runs. That's kind of the nervousness around for me. Did you, from your perspective, was there anything that you think, Obviously, it was the 11 that we've used. I think it was the 5th Premier League game in a row that we've had the same 11. It's our best team, right? But just a few things seemed off. And to me, it felt like the kind of game where I think we've forgotten how good Gabriel Jesus was. And it's no slight on Nketiah, but it just very much felt like a physical game like this, with those many battles happening. This would have been the perfect game for Jesus. And I think we really saw how much we missed him on the weekend. Like up until now, Nketiah had filled in like just fine, but I think we really saw how much we missed Jesus and how quickly we would like to get him back.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a case of forgetting how good he is. I think it's just Nketiah's done very well, right? But I think for me, this is what, do you remember that pod we did when Jesus got injured? And I described it as why I thought we'd be fine is the system is 80% and Jesus's individual brilliance was 20%. I feel like we've seen the 80% so far, but this was the 20% where we needed that individual brilliance. And like, because I saw a lot of similarities in this game compared to the Leeds game as well. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But one of the similarities for me was our team this year and individuals have been so consistent, like 7, 8, 9s out of 10 every game. And it feels like Leeds, it was a game where 4 or 5 of our key cogs just did not turn up. And when that happens, you're up against it, right? And I think that's where a Jesus in this game, fucking hell, it would be like a get out of jail free card, right? It just gives you that level of unpredictability that Nketiah doesn't. And again, it's not a slight on Eddie at all. It's just I like to look at them as a pair and what can they give us for different environments, different game states, right? I talk about that a lot across like the attack, the midfield and the defense, but that was it really. And yeah, unfortunately, that is a game where we could have really done with him. I think the other thing, which I think we would have seen had he been fit and we would, if we were still struggling, is a change in formation. And I've got an opinion that I'd like to talk about later on what I would have done differently. But we saw it in pre-season. We were kind of going 3-5-2 sometimes against, was it Aston Villa where we needed a goal? And he whacked them both on at the same time Nketiah and Jesus.
We had the front two. We took Zinchenko off in the 60th minute, I think, against Fulham when we were 1-0 down and brought on another attacker as well.
Yeah, so I think this is where we're just missing that bit of variety, unpredictability and individual brilliance that he gives us, right? But in terms of individuals, fuck me, it's just like I don't know how it happens. When,
I think it's what you said, though, right? Like if 2 of them are like
time.
like if 2 or 3 of them, have an off day, normally you expect the rest of them to be there to carry it. But almost everyone dropped the subpar performance. I do agree with Mike that the centre backs, they did as much as they could.
They were fantastic, yeah.
And if you look at the corner which they scored from as well, it's quite interesting because obviously Odegaard.
So I've not actually watched the highlights.
Okay, yeah. So in the highlights,
I can't bring myself to do it.
Yeah, no. So it's like a deep corner at the back post, and if you watch, they did that a few times in the game, and every time Saliba did a really good job of getting the ball out of the box before it became a danger. And in the one where they score, you see one of their players manage to basically like block Saliba out of defending that. So then it ended up going back to Tarkowski, who had Odegaard on him, and I think that's where there was a bit of a mismatch and. We basically relied on Saliba to clear up all of the similar corners that had come up until that moment. And you remember there was that period where they were getting like 3-4 corners in quick succession. Yeah. So Saliba was dealing with them all. And then I think they realized that and quite quickly adapted and basically like blocked his path so he couldn't get to the back post to help Odegaard out. And I think that's where it went a bit wrong for us. And we made substitutions just before it. I know we brought on, Trossard instead of Martinelli. I think
that
was it at the same time?
Right?
That was very early. I wasn't expecting that, like 59th minute or whatever it was, 58th minute.
I was like, this is what I've been saying. Like, I've been very bullish on. Like, I love Martinelli, and again, there's a slide. I don't know if you saw it, but I put a slide in later on about our structure and the left-hand side. I really want to talk about because I've got some very strong opinions on that. But one of the things I've been very bullish on is I don't think Martinelli's minutes are safe at all. I think a lot of people, especially on like FPL Twitter, are like, oh, he's safe and Trossard's not going to go. I think Trossard's going to get more starts than people think. I really do. I don't think it will come in the immediate because I think he's going to work backwards from the City game. But yeah, I think early hooks are going to be on the horizon. And yeah, like I said, I've got some thoughts on that left-hand side.
Yeah, no, we'll talk about that because I have a lot of thoughts as well about, I think we've talked in previous episodes about Martinelli and Nketiah's link-up not quite being the same as Jesus and Martinelli. And I do think that since Nketiah's come in the team, that right-hand side with Saka seems to be doing much better. In terms of who perhaps did well, obviously the two centre-backs did great.
Yeah.
Saka, I thought, did as much as he could as well. But again, like, it just wasn't our day. Like,
He
they were
almost
very
scored,
physical,
right? That
right?
volley.
Yeah, so that volley, which they
I actually
cleared off
thought
the
that hit
goal
the
line.
post. Yeah, because when I was where I
Yeah.
was, I couldn't. Also, the view at Giderson, fucking hell! I knew you get a restricted view, but I couldn't see shit. So
Someone sent me
yeah,
photos where there's like a pillar just blocking like a third of the
yeah,
pitch,
it's
depending on where you're sitting.
I really liked the stadium for what it's worth, though. It was very old school, traditional, like old school wooden seats, which was
Oh,
like
wow.
going back to my cushy seat at the Emirates on Saturday is going to be different. But yeah, obviously that Saka chance, I thought it hit the post because of my limited view. But yeah, I think that was
So I
going
think
in,
that
right?
was just unfortunate. It was going in. There was a goal line clearance from I think it was one of their defensive midfielders or
I feel like
centre
it was
backs.
Cody.
Yeah, he was just kind of standing on the line. The keeper was not going to get there. So I think that technique on the volley, I thought that was fantastic. And
Yeah.
it's such a shame it didn't go. We did have opportunities. I think, like, when you look at the game in reality, like, Nketiah had a chance as well, which I think he himself knew from his reaction afterwards that
He has
should have
to
at
hit the
least
target
hit the
there.
target. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he tried to go near post and obviously skied it over. But if he was able to just try and get it to the far post from the keeper and sneak it through, like, just a pretty little pass into the net almost, like, so that was unfortunate.
Like he did against West Ham, right? If he just drilled it across.
Exactly.
But I think he went for the Saka against Leeds finish, just like top bins near
Just
post.
straight into the top rocket, yeah.
I think
he basically
Odegaard
went
could
for a
have done
lot of
better
power.
with. Yeah, like Nketiah then went on a brilliant dribble, cut in, and gave it back to Odegaard. And I think he could have done better there.
He also didn't hit the target, right? So there was definitely a few opportunities. It was only the second game of the season that we were defeated on expected goals. Obviously, the other one being Leeds. So it's not like, I don't feel we can feel sorry for ourselves. And when you put out the tweet about this episode, one of the things you said was that Everton, Sean Dyche mastered essentially a deserved Everton win.
Yeah, they did.
It would be remiss of me to say that, like, oh, they got lucky. That no way. Like, we just were not at the races on the day. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and they played very well. Like, I can't complain about that. Fair play to them. Now, the one thing I will say, and it frustrates me, is because I haven't looked at the replays too much because, like you, I don't want to go through the trauma again. But
if you're going to talk about the potential pen, I've seen that one.
Yeah, so, like, obviously they said that, like, Gabriel's initiate contact falling into their player, and then on the commentary that I was watching, and then I watched back, they showed it a couple of times at the time when VAR were checking it. And obviously you can see Gabriel gets taken out, and then he falls into their player. Now, I kind of look at other similar incidents, like, this season so far. Like, there was the games where I think Saka got picked up from behind and thrown to the floor in the box. I've seen a few incidents like this where we have not been given the call. VAR has not looked at it, or they've just said no. And although I think that's probably, another one of those kind of marginal 50-50s, depends on the referee's subjective decision, I do find it frustrating that 20 games in, we've had one penalty all season, yet our players are perhaps some of the most targeted, especially our wingers, in terms of being fouled constantly. Like, I could see, like, our players would get frustrated. And it was at the Southampton game where they were basically like fuggery all over the pitch, and like Lianco put his throats around our players, but nothing happened.
So
right?
I don't think they were like that personally on Saturday. I thought they won fair and square.
No, I think they won fair and square, but
right.
it's frustrating. I mean, in other games, where we've been unfairly targeted and the refs let the game. I thought the ref knew this was a physical game, and he kind of let play go on a lot on both sides. So I think it was fair in that respect. But it's just that penalty specifically, that one moment, not the rest of the game. That one moment.
So you think it was a pen then?
That's the thing. It just kind of the law of averages. I just kind of look at it and I add it to all the other incidents that I felt aggrieved. And I'm like, how can not one of them have been a pen? It's like, maybe not that day, but surely one of these, like the one against Southampton or the one today. Like, and it just really frustrates me that, like, that keeps happening. And I know that United have felt aggrieved recently because, to be fair to them, they've had a few incidents where, like, someone injured Eriksen for 4 months, no card shown. Like, they've had a few penalties that were not given that look like clear penalties. So it's just more generally, I'm still pissed off about, like, the competency and the consistency of the refereeing in this league is what I'm getting at. Not about us. It's happening to other teams too. And it's just really sad to see that in a league of this caliber, that, like, PGMOL can't get the refs to tell us, like, I just want an announcer in the stadium to tell the fans, like, this was the decision-making process that we are not giving it. VAR has checked. Or, like, I want to hear the VAR decision-making and some accountability is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. The reason I'm not sure on that one is I've only seen one angle, which I think is the viral one doing the rounds. And I feel like one angle never really tells the story, but I think it's a perspective thing. I think because we're Arsenal, we think Gabriel's going for the ball, but if you're Everton, you're probably thinking Morpé's just kind of got his body in the way, and Gabriel kind of trips
So
over him, sort of
Everton
thing.
didn't
So,
have the ball, so I think that's what went their way. In that, when the VAR look at it, they're like, "Well, Gabriel doesn't have the ball. He never had the ball,
yeah,
and
that's
it's
what I
just a
think it would be
50-50
harsh
coming together.
personally.
It's like shoulder to shoulder, whatever." So no,
Yeah,
I do agree, but I just thought I'd put that out there because there's never a game without every weekend in every match there seems to be some kind of
yeah.
call that people want to question. I think this one was probably the right one, and I think we just have to accept, as Mike says, to give credit to Everton that they did do a
Yeah.
job on us.
On that, should we go on to the next one and dissect what they did to us, unfortunately?
Let's do that. Just quick shout out to William as well. Thanks for tuning in live. And Terence Tibbs, shalom, mate. Good to see you. And I'll star this comment you've made to come back to at the end of the Q&A. Any questions or comments that we can maybe discuss further with you guys in the chat, I'll star for the end. Let's just do a quick recap of the match. As I said, this was pretty much the second game where we've lost on XG. You can see it in the cumulative expected goals here from the Markar stat spot on Twitter. And obviously, they had 1.63 XG to our 0.94. Their expected threat was 1.96 to our 1.41. We had possession going for us at about 70% to 30%. Field tilt as well, 63% to 37%, us in their third. Defensive line height was pretty standard for us, 56 to 41. So the kind of, from a possession and field tilt and defensive line height point of view, I think we basically played our way. But from what I could see, like, we just couldn't finish. We had a few chances. We couldn't hit the target. We couldn't finish. And the one chance where we were going to hit the target, they cleared it off the goal line with a very well-placed defender in the way.
Yeah, so for me, it was like even one step back from that. I actually thought the first 20 minutes, we started exceptionally well. I thought the level of control, like, do you remember in the preview, the one thing I said was I thought it would be like Brentford away in terms of level of control. And the first 20 minutes, I was like, oh, fucking hell, here we go, boys. Like, we're in for a good couple here. But what you said about it was like bad finishing and bad. For me, it was a step back from that, and it was like we'd arrive in the right areas, but then it was like the final ball was off. And for me, the other thing that I noticed a lot was, you know how like we overload one side, keep someone isolated on the other, and then switch it. I felt like the switch was so slow that by the time it was getting out to Saka, they had two on him. By the time it was getting out to Martinelli, they had two on him. And then the pattern that you started to see, which I don't know when it was, but I remember Iwobi and McNeil, they swapped sides. And I don't know what impact that had defensively, but offensively for them, I feel like it was easier for them to kind of go on the outside, get crosses in, rather than, like the standard of most wingers nowadays. It's you cut in, whip a cross in. But defensively for us, I feel like after that, that's when you started to see the template of what Leeds did to us, what Newcastle did, and kind of just blocking and suffocating those central areas and the half spaces. And that's where I felt like that's our bread and butter, right? We kind of go through centrally, we isolate, we have our distances spot on, and it's a bang, like we just teased teams.
You have like Xhaka and Odegaard coming into the half spaces, collecting and passing on. Like it's like what you're saying. It was the same with Newcastle, right? Like as soon as they got Dan Burn extra protection, I think Bruno Guimaraes came and doubled up with him potentially against Saka. We just couldn't get the ball in anymore. And it is a very bold claim, but like you remember, obviously we wanted. There was rumors we wanted Calvert-Lewin a while back. I know that time is gone, but he had a header which he just like kind of missed the target and stuff, and like he was very strong.
They had a few chances.
Yeah, they did. So that's what I mean. And the other thing I noticed was like the reason I bring up Calvert-Lewin is we didn't yes, we brought on Trossard for Martinelli, but with Jesus out, there was no we didn't have another striker to bring on. And I think although our bench has looked much better, having Smith Rowe still not quite there and Jesus out, I think yes, we're in a better position depth-wise than we were against Newcastle, but it just still felt like the combination of not making our final passes, as you say, not connecting them, not making the right final third decision, and them being very well organized, combined with there's still key players missing, and it just, even though we had an okay window, it still wasn't enough to get.
So can I tell you what I wanted to do, which I think is going to be a very unpopular opinion, and I'm going to set the context why first before I get shat on. So I feel like we had a false element of control in that game, where we had the control, as you can see statistically, but it felt like after the 20th minute, okay, 20th, that's harsh. Like, it felt like we were arriving in the right areas, but we weren't really doing anything with it. There were half chances, like we've said, Nketiah's one, Odegaard's one, but I don't remember us having like a clear cut opportunity. And usually I'd say we're getting a few a game. Like, we cut through teams like a hot knife through butter, right? And for me, I just felt like we had a full sense of control on this. And especially when they went 1-0 up, I don't know about you, I never felt like a goal was coming. And although I can see the logic in the Trossard for Martinelli switch, I thought systematically we had to change something. And what I would have done, which is a bit risky considering I would have done one of two things. I would have, and both of them involved getting Tierney on and there's a slide later on, right, which I want to go into detail. So I talk about our positional play a lot, right? And I've also said about, like we've both said about the left side, how off the dynamics have been. One thing you see in positional play, it's so structurally clever where you've got different lanes. So imagine if you've got 3 vertical lanes, right? And you've got one in like the center, one in the half space, one on the outside lane. So imagine on the right, you've got White in one of them, Odegaard in one of them, and then Saka in the other. On the left, you're meant to have the same, but right now, Zinchenko and Xhaka are kind of playing in the same vertical, and Martinelli's isolated in his lane where he should be, but that distance, and this will come onto this because you can see it in the passing maps quite clearly, but the distance between Xhaka out to Martinelli is mental. There's no like link in between them, and I know we're doing this so Zinchenko can become central. For me, why I wanted Tierney on is whether it's Martinelli or Trossard, I felt like that game, we were being forced central, but we weren't doing anything with it. We couldn't unlock it. And I think having Zinchenko there is important, but I think having Martinelli or Trossard closer to goal is important in that sense. So what I wanted was the lanes of 3. I wanted Zinchenko, Tierney, and Martinelli. And I wanted Tierney to be the outlet. I wanted Zinchenko to be in that half space. And I wanted Martinelli to be the one close to goal. And that's what I would have done personally to change things. And it's hard to visualize this right now, but we'll see it in a couple of diagrams time. It's so easy to see, because that's for me where I think we weren't getting any joy in kind of cutting through half spaces and a pretty little football. So for me, I would have gone, okay, Tierney, you play as the outlet. What can Tierney do brilliantly? We've seen him struggle play that inverted fullback role. Saturday for me was a game crying out for a traditional outlet fullback for me personally. Like, I've seen people on Twitter saying, oh, we need to start with like that against Brentford. I disagree on that. I just think game state wise for me on Saturday was calling out for that, having a traditional fullback who can just get there, get to the byline, get in across, and then you've got Martinelli more central to goal. You've got Zinchenko on the edge of the box should you need it. I felt like Xhaka wasn't really having a game where he could influence anything, because in certain game states, you still see some of his limitations in that left half space. Like, he's fantastic as an option 90% of the time. But again, like, to be a top team, you've got these areas where you can sort of marginally improve things. So that's for me what I wanted. And that's why I was a bit disappointed. He just went like for like. The system stayed exactly the same. And for me, it was the system that wasn't really working, because Everton tactically was spot on. They completely nullified us. And I just felt like we were never getting anything. So to your point, like, the transfer window was good, but it still didn't look like we had enough. I think that's where you got to be a bit clever and just kind of look at what you've got, tweak the system accordingly. Because I've got no doubt if Jesus was there, I'm sure Jesus would have been starting, but you get on Nketiah, right? You switch I've got no doubt if Jesus was there, he would have switched the system and gone with 2 up top. So I don't know why he wasn't looking at, okay, right now, this system in this game alone isn't working for me. Let me switch it up. And I feel very confident that would have changed things, because then you've got someone like Martinelli, who's very good at going on the outside, getting to the byline, but then he cuts back because he's right-footed. Tierney takes on his fullback, gets to the byline, bang, there's a cross in, right? How many goals did City score over the years from just get to the byline, get a cross in? I feel like that would have been
tap-ins. Yeah, he was always there. It works so well.
I feel like that would have then forced mistakes as well. And yeah, that's what I was quite disappointed that we didn't do something like that, especially as like White wasn't having the best game on the other side, right?
Yeah. I think one thing, and I guess maybe your graphic does show it when we get there. I've not looked at it yet, but I saw something which was like the average position of our players. And
that's exactly what the graphic is.
Okay, let me pull that up then, because what you said is spot on. Like, this is exactly the graphic I remember seeing on TV. Yeah. So when you look at it, like, everyone on the right, you've got like Saka, Odegaard, and Nketiah, White. They're all
it's
together.
perfect.
But then when you look on the left, like, I know people have been talking about Martinelli's not quite been performing at the same level a few games and rest. When I look at this match, like he was on his own. Like he was literally on his own. So like
Who?
you
Sorry,
get
my
him
connection cut out
Martinelli.
there.
So
All right,
Martinelli
yeah.
was on his own. Like for anyone who's on the podcast, like there is a huge chasm of space. And there's no one even behind him, right? Because Zinchenko is tucked in. So I think there's a combination here where just before Martinelli got subbed, there was a brief period where he did start to look a bit more threatening. And it was actually coincided with when he started coming in centrally. I saw him on the right wing interchanging passes with Saka after playing it from the centre to Saka on the right. We'd seen it in the cup before where he had to take the game by the scruff of the neck and we couldn't get a goal in one of the cup games earlier last season. So this season. And again, he came into the middle. So he did the drive that we talked about last episode where he normally drives to the byline, tries to get past as many defenders as he can, and then lay it off the one of Saka or Odegaard. But occasionally you see Martinelli make that drive just straight into the center of the pitch.
Yeah.
And whenever he does that, I know we're going to cook normally. And it looked good. And like him and Saka had a bit of interplay. But then he just got subbed off. And as you say, what kind of happened was Trossard then came on. And he still got no difference in terms of protection. So he was just as wide as Martinelli. And again, he had 2 free players come to him. And he had no one to give it to.
A couple of his efforts were so disappointing, weren't they, Trossard? Like he got into the right area, but just didn't really make the right connection. Like one
and that's
of them,
where the Tierney thing, though. So when you said Tierney, I was like that would have been perfect because in a scenario like this, Tierney would offer him an overlapping run, and I feel like
it would take someone away.
The thing, yeah, exactly. So it gives Martinelli that time and space, and I think that's something that I think is obviously tactical. We clearly are asking him to stay wide. And we do the same with Saka, right? Like we see Saka really wide. And one of the things we've done really well this season is we go down one wing. Let's say we're going down Saka's wing or Martinelli's. And if we can't unlock it because they're, as you say, blocking all our passes into the half space, we very quickly just distribute it back to the other wing. Yeah. And one thing we saw here was we were very slow at getting the ball from one flank to the other. And by the time we did, the winger on the side it moved to would then also be doubled up on. So that was, I think, one thing I noticed where like it was very different to other games. And I'm not blaming the pitch, I promise. Like this is like they were better than us.
It has an impact, though.
But it has an impact. And obviously, like I know Klopp's used pitches as excuses before. We did not lose because of the pitch, but I think obviously whatever was wrong with the
speed of the pass, right? Like we're not saying that's why we lost, but of course it's a tiny factor behind things. Yeah,
and we talk about fine margins, right? So obviously they say the pitch was very dry. Dyche came in and instantly started measuring pitches and like had issues with certain things. He obviously dried the pitch, is what I'm getting at, and it affects both teams. So it's not just detrimental to us. You would say it's detrimental to them too. The difference is for the style of football we play. With the passing we tried to execute, the speed at which we execute, it meant every pass that we could normally use to distribute the ball to flank, getting the balls across the pitch quickly, you would have to, overcompensate and put more power on the ball. And I think that's where we kind of, that fine margin, it really screwed us over a bit.
Exactly.
Like we just we didn't know how to adapt to a new game plan or a structure change. And I do want to just add, Terence obviously makes this joke, like, I don't think any of us are tactical geniuses, but I think it's easy to watch the game with hindsight and from the view that we have to know like what a player or a manager should have done. One thing I will say about Arteta is, and I think we need to be understanding of this, is he is learning on that job as much as the young players we keep talking about. We talk about these young players who have this big ceiling, they're barely at their prime. It's not just the youngest squad, he is the youngest manager doing this. And I think we've seen over the years, he can be quite stubborn with in-game management. And I think this was a game where... Well, as in, like when you think about it, like he was so stubborn to like play his system, right? Like he did like for like. He didn't.
Yeah, but my thing is
much beyond that.
My thing on that is that was just because of what he had available. I think he has shown like he's willing to switch things up when he has people he trusts, and I think obviously me saying this now is purely hindsight, having looked back at what we saw and stuff, but. Just one thing that's important to say is obviously this system has been working, right? There's no need to be like reactionary of like, oh my God, we need to change everything at Brentford. I think it's just more as a substitute and a system tweak. I feel like that personally would have got the job done on Saturday. And just to go back to what I was saying earlier, because it was harder without the graphic. You see what I was saying about the lanes there, right? Just imagine 3 vertical lines drawn in the middle of Saka's name, middle of White's name, middle of Odegaard's name. That's... Like if you look at positional play, and like I've said this before, we've done the slides, but we need to actually do the pod. that's how the pitch is split. It's split into different vertical and horizontal lines to have positional and numerical superiority across the pitch. And we do it brilliantly. But if you look at Zinchenko and Xhaka, they were in the same vertical there as long as Gabriel. So like there's no one thing you say about Arsenal is every player's always got 2-3 options surrounding them. On the left at the moment, it's a bit too narrow and a bit too vertical. And then what you said about Everton, like blocking out the half spaces, it's because look at the gap from Zinchenko and Xhaka to Martinelli. They just get someone in that half space and they kind of crowd that out, right? And I think that's for me where you kind of tweak it, take the outlet from an inside forward and make it a fullback, and then put that forward closer to goal in Martinelli. And then I would have taken Xhaka off personally. I don't really think he was giving us anything in that game towards the end.
What do you think about Odegaard though? So obviously he got taken off earlier than I would expect when you're 1-0 down, like 74th minute. It did look like he maybe took a bit of a knock in the match.
And that stamp on his Achilles, right? I think it could have been both to him. Like, I didn't think he was having his best game, but
yeah, he wasn't. But I think someone in the chat said that essentially, like the fact that he didn't have his best game, and I think it was William. He said it's really obvious, like in this game, how dysfunctional we become if you shut down Martin or if he's not having his best day. So I think that combination of Martinelli being isolated and then on the right hand side, Odegaard not quite having his day, and also being stamped on, it just didn't quite work. But again, like, you know, we brought on Vieira. I thought against a low block, like he did have his moments. But again, like I wonder, could we have done that earlier, considering what you said about Odegaard wasn't quite there. He wasn't having his best day. So I think, guys, in the live chat, let me know. I think Clayton's Wi-Fi has given up, so I'll continue till he's back. I'm going to go back to this slide about the passing networks very quickly, which... you can see again that on the Arsenal left flank, Martinelli, the 11, is obviously like high and wide. And there is no one really near him. Like I think you can see the lines here. Zinchenko and Xhaka are like vertically above each other, as he mentioned in this slide. Whereas on the right-hand side, you've got Saka's getting the support from Odegaard and from White. And it just feels like it's performing better in that respect. Something I did see that's quite a worrying thing is that normally... you know, when Jesus was playing, obviously him and Martinelli would have a lot of interplay. Like Jesus would drift to the left wing, Martinelli would come in more centrally. However, if you look at some of these matches, the number of successful passes between Nketiah and Martinelli per game is pretty shocking. Like it's like some games it's like one pass successful between them. So there is definitely less chemistry, I think, between them and the way they play. And that is a bit detrimental to Martinelli. I guess the question for you guys in the chat, I'd love to know your thoughts, is what do you think we should do for Brentford? So, sorry, I'll just bring Clayton back in. So I just brought you back in. So I was just continuing your point, but just re-showing it on this network map as well, where you can see that obviously Saka has the support from White and Odegaard, whereas Martinelli doesn't. And we're just talking about the interplay between Eddie and Martinelli, and that there have been games recently where it's actually quite shocking the number of successful passes between them. Like I think there was a game, maybe Everton, where it was one pass between them to each other. So it's like there is definitely a big difference in their connectivity, as Mike is saying as well. So my question, and you come in at a perfect time for this, Clayton, is so what do we do for Brentford? Because we're going to have 3 games in a week. We're going to have Brentford, City, and then another game the following weekend. Obviously, you're in a scenario where the 11 that you probably think we're going to play against City, do you just like play them again anyway so that they're the ones who start the next game and can get this out their system? Or do you actually make some substitutes to freshen up the team? So like, does someone like a Tomiyasu come in for a White? Does a Trossard come in for a Martinelli? And if they do, is that a good or bad thing? Because like, does that mean that we're like not prepping with the right team that are going to start the next game? Or is it that actually it's people's positions to lose, and say Tomiyasu does come in and he does do very well in the next game, maybe he starts against City, right? So like, how are you thinking about it? Like, how do you think that? Because I reckon before this result, before we lost to Everton, we were probably going to always rotate a few positions in this Brentford game at home. But having dropped points now, I don't know. Like, does he just go for the same 11 again for the 6th game in a row? Or do you think Trossard and White get in? And what is the impact for City based on that?
But I think he'll make a couple of changes. And why is, fast forward a week, we've got Brentford on Saturday. We've then got City on Wednesday. We've got Aston Villa the following Saturday, 12:30. I
Oof.
think he's gonna. Yeah, I think everyone's kind of focusing on just up to City, and no one's focusing on the week ahead of that. Villa away 12:30 against someone like Emery, who tactically gets it spot on against the opposition. Do you remember when he was Arsenal manager? That was one of our like pet peeves. He focused too much on the opposition and not enough on like our strengths.
Yeah.
Annoyingly, with him in the opposite dugout, that's going to be a fucking problem. So I think against Brentford, I think he will bring in like Tomiyasu and Trossard maybe. And then City, I think it will be what has been primarily the starting 11 this season, unless Trossard has a worldie, Tomiyasu has a worldie. Ben White is an interesting one, because at the moment, he hasn't looked himself the last couple of games. And I said after the Man United game that, that was just a one-off. Like, it's his only game this season where he's not really been to the standard we know of him. He was against Rashford, one of the best wingers in the league this season, and he was on a yellow. But then he went and didn't play too well against Everton. And I feel like someone like Tomiyasu waiting in the wings, who has been, he was one of our players of the season.
He was one of our
right?
top players, right? Like, he came in and we were all shocked, like how well he adapted to the league.
I think he's going to let Tommy and White fight it out and give himself a headache ahead of City, personally. But yeah, that's why I think there'll be changes. I think because 3 games in 7 days. And Brentford, I know we're all looking at that as like, it'll be a great home game to bounce back. I don't think it'll be easy. I think Thomas Frank, tactically, he's switched on. Like, he'll try and sort of, I think he'll probably look to replicate what Newcastle, Leeds and Everton have done. Like, I don't think they'll have the level of success because of the personnel available. But I think that's not going to be an easy game. City is going to take a lot out of us. And then I think next Saturday against Villa, that's going to be a tough one. So I think as a result, he'll make a couple of changes this Saturday, go full strength against City, hopefully get a result against them, and then reassess before Villa.
I think it's a matter of, like, especially at home, like, I think obviously a win would be hugely monumental, but I think it's a matter of just trying not to lose. And I know that's not the way we've been. Yeah, the City game, yeah.
I was hoping you weren't saying about the Brentford game.
Oh, no. Like, we have to go back to winning ways there. Obviously, City play Villa at home in their weekend fixture before they face us. But yeah, no, I think that City game, I think you were right. The away fixture is like in April sometime. I don't think we need to look that far ahead and worry about that.
Yeah. No.
I think it's all about this next block, right? This block of 3 games together. And then very soon in March, like obviously Europa will start again. Thankfully, we don't have the 2-legged tie for the last 32 knockout with the Champions League teams. So that helps a little bit with congestion. Just talking of Jesus, obviously we've been seeing he was on the grass. He's doing running. So it's looking good. Obviously, these are rumors, so I don't believe them fully. But some people were saying, he's due back in team training in 10 days. And I think he's still quite a bit off. I think one thing you got to just be very careful of is never trust a player's assessment of when they're going to be back, because they always want to be back sooner. And like, obviously people have seen this interview that he did with Khabib, and I'm like, okay, like, I don't know what he's doing with Khabib.
Is that where he said 10 days or something?
So in that one, they asked him at the end of Jan, like 20th of Jan or something, like, when will you be back? I'm going to be ready to play in 4 to 5 weeks. So they asked Arteta about what do you think of what Jesus said, and he said, look, like, he obviously is really keen to come back soon, but like, look, it's just like he needs to just calm down and like just take his time. So I think that's just one thing to be careful of, is like a quote from Jesus at like a boxing match somewhere or something, telling someone 4 to 5 weeks randomly, and then just because he happens to be on grass, he's got to still run faster, start to run in different directions. And at each of these different stages, as someone who's, you've had knee injury, I'm sure you know that, like, there can be setbacks at any of these different steps along the way back. Like, just because he might be 10 days away from team training doesn't mean his knee won't get aggravated as he steps up the training.
Exactly.
So this could always take a bit longer. In my eyes, people are saying it'll be great if he can just make the bench against City.
I
think that's delusional.
No. Yeah,
if you think he's going to be on the bench in a week's time, you're risking injuring him for the rest of the season, which is just playing with fire. So personally, I think we'll be lucky to see him before March. I don't think we're going to see him. I think we might see him once Europa kicks up.
So that's my theory. Let me try to get the fantasy website in front of me. So my theory is that in between game week 26 and 27, we've got Bournemouth at home, and then we've got Fulham away. And I'm sure in between that is when our Europa League campaign starts again. I reckon the plan might be to bring him on as a sub against Bournemouth or in that Europa game, and then kind of bring him on as a sub again against Fulham, and then look to see how he's doing.
I think he's going to need 1 to 2 sub appearances. Like, I don't buy the idea of doing 60 minutes being subbed off. I think that's very risky considering that he is trying to recover quickly. So I do think that Bournemouth game sounds about right to me as well. All right, let's do some of the questions that we starred from the live chat during the show. Some of them are statements or comments.
I missed one as my Wi-Fi kicked me out. But what was the thing about Odegaard and like a dysfunctional team or something?
Yeah, so I'll bring that up. It was just the idea that well, this is a completely different comment, but it's about Odegaard as well. So I'll put both of them up. Let me start with Williams' one, which was that he felt it was real obvious in this game how dysfunctional we are if you like shut down Odegaard or if he's not having his best day, which he didn't have. So that was just like a thought or more of a statement. And I guess what I was saying is I wouldn't have minded seeing Vieira come on even earlier than he did, because it felt like the ideal game against a low block to try and get him to open up their team a bit. But it didn't quite work out for us that way. So Terence as well, just on Odegaard, while we're on the topic of Odegaard before we move on, he was saying about dropping Odegaard for like a DM, so having almost like 2 in the pivot instead of just Partey, and then playing a centre forward. So like, I guess having 2 CMs who are pinging the ball up to a target man, like a Calvert-Lewin, which is why I brought him up. Or he talks about Tammy Abraham. Like, I definitely think like having a plan B that we can just like whip crosses into. Like when you look at Liverpool and City, especially Liverpool, actually, when they were playing at their best over the last few seasons, these were teams that were whipping in like 20 crosses a game. And just the sheer volume of crosses they were getting in, there were players there who could get them in. And I don't think we have that aerial presence either with Jesus or Nketiah personally.
So
it would be nice to have a third. Maybe Balogun is the guy and he needs to come back.
I think we do have that with more so Jesus because of his movement and like he's got that leap and he's deceivingly strong. And I think I think the way I look at aerial presence isn't just, are you a big lump? Are you like a fucking unit? I think I look at it as like, what's your movement like? Can you get in front of your man quicker than someone? Because if someone's in the half space putting in a cross and you've got a striker that's getting in front of their man, it doesn't matter how tall or how short you are or how strong you are. Like, remember Hernandez, Chicharito at Man United? He was one of the best headers around and he was about 5'7". Like,
that is true,
I think we have got that element to us. And yeah, I'm not sure about like kind of going for a physical powerhouse up front. I think we've got more than enough in Jesus and Nketiah personally for what we're trying to do at the minute, but we've just been unlucky that Jesus is out for
so like long term, let's say going into next season.
Yeah.
Like, would you like, I guess the question would be, do we recall Balogun from loan or do we loan him again and then like try to bring in a striker? And long term, can we see both Eddie and Balogun staying at the club? Or is it the case that one of them is going to have to go because they're going to be too good to not be getting regular minutes? So I think that will be a bridge we're going to have to cross as a team and make a decision at some point.
So next season, like we'll be in the Champions League, right? Like we don't need to shit ourselves about jinxing that. But I think we will have 3 forwards for that campaign. And I say forwards because I think we'll have Jesus and Eddie. I don't think Eddie's going to go anywhere. And then it's a case on, is it going to be Balogun or will he get someone in that can play across the front for you? Because I think the difference with the Champions League is you know how we've seen this year against Zurich at home, Bodo at home, we can make 6-7 changes, right? And although the level dropped off, it's still enough to get the results. In the Champions League, we're going to be playing every 3 days, and the level needs to be like that.
You can't do 6-7 changes on this. Yeah, so unless you've got 2-3 squads worth of first team players like City, like you can't be benching half your squad.
Exactly. Signings like Kiwi or Trossard, like they'll be able to play in the Champions League or the Premier League. It doesn't matter who the opposition is. We're raising that level of the squad, right? And that's why I think in the central striker area, I'd be very surprised if we just went with Jesus and Nketiah next season. I'd be pretty confident we'd get.
Yeah, I'd be concerned if we went into the campaign with just the 2 of them. Yeah, I would hope there would be one more at least. Just here, Pontus says that. So Dale Johnson, the ESPN
yeah.
VAR guy I was talking about, he said that like potential penalty incident was as close as it could be to being an overturn by
Interesting.
VAR. Interestingly, Howard Webb has come out and said that if that United City game happened again, Rashford would be offside for interfering with play. So make of that what you will. 2 big calls at home at Old Trafford. Disallowed Martinelli goal for an Odegaard foul that they also have come out and, as a referee panel said, was a mistake and shouldn't have been disallowed. And this time I'm not going to complain because their offside goal helped keep City at bay from us. So I'll take that one as a victory. But it is interesting that I think a lot of the big 6 clubs, I don't think it's just United. I think that's unfair to kind of scapegoat them like that. When you're at home and you have the home crowd, I definitely feel that it influences referees. And it's happened at the Emirates as well, to us as well. And I've seen it where they're like, oh, well, I think we're just going to give Arsenal the benefit of the doubt and give them this call because
they're
like they've been playing much
they're
better
not
all game. Yeah.
They have
they're hearing
emotions.
all the fans making
influenced.
noise. Like,
it's just
exactly.
it's not a conscious thing, but humans subconsciously are influenced all the time. So of course it's a factor. Yeah.
So just to keep going, so William was saying, like, I really want Vieira to get a start soon. Where and how, I don't know.
I think in one of the home coming
games,
up,
right?
I think we can go with Odegaard and Vieira, and Xhaka doesn't need to play personally. Like we saw it against Wolves away, and again, it's not a slight on Xhaka. I just think we've got these quality options. So let's utilize them against different oppositions who gives us different opportunities, right, and different needs. And we saw it against Wolves away. Xhaka got injured, I believe, and then Odegaard moved over to the left.
He came on very early. Vieira came on very early, didn't he? Yeah.
And Vieira had a key part in both goals, if I recall correctly. So for me, it would be in like one of the plum home fixtures. I can't remember who they are off the top of my head, but like, let me have a quick look. So like Bournemouth at home. Why not?
That could be the game, and then that's just in time for like the Europa as well, potentially. So get him getting into action. Mike said he'd consider starting Trossard. So I do think that there is a world in which Ben White might not start against Brentford. It's a wait and see.
For my fantasy team.
Same for me. And then on top of that, Martinelli. I'm just going to bring up Martinelli because Delia's coming as well. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. And we did talk about Martinelli a bit earlier in the episode, but I don't think we really spoke about him shining again soon. I think it was more about how in the system with Nketiah instead of Jesus, he's very isolated and he doesn't have the interplay. He doesn't get to rotate with Nketiah, where Nketiah will go left wing like Jesus did, and Martinelli will go centrally. One of the things I think to show you, Delia, is this was the graphic of the average positions. And we were just saying that what kind of Clayton was explaining was if you imagine there's 3 vertical lines on the right from Saka, White, and Odegaard, those are kind of the width in Saka. White is there as well in the half space, and Odegaard is like going in centrally. On the other side, Martinelli has a huge chasm, and Zinchenko and Xhaka are in the same vertical lane. So it definitely feels like he is being left out there on his own, and just even the number of successful passes between Nketiah and Martinelli is very low. So I am quite genuinely worried about his number of minutes, like in terms of just, let's say before this fixture, I would have told you he might get 74 minutes a game in the next 2 in the double game week from an FPL point of view. Now, I'd be concerned in the double game week that Martinelli is not going to be getting one of those 2 as a start. And suddenly,
do you remember when everyone laughed at me when I said that as well?
They did. So that's unfortunately.
Can I just add to that? Just one more thing.
Yeah. I'll let you add to it, but also answer this question from her, which was just about. Obviously, she thinks it's his time to shine again very soon. He signed a new contract.
That's what I wanted to add on.
That side of it, yeah.
So, if you go, I know you don't need to go back on the graphic. Actually, that graphic for me, I wanted to include because, for me, that was a specific thing against Everton where, like, we've been playing with this structure, right? Like this isn't anything new. It's just Everton found a way to combat it. And that's why I wanted to illustrate that. Delia, all we were saying was in that game, it required something systematically different. If Martinelli plays coming up, I'd look at the opponents and I don't see many of them coming up tactically being able to cut off like, I never thought I'd say this, but I don't see any of the opponents cutting off that kind of outlet that Martinelli's had, like Everton did. I never thought I'd say that, but that's the Sean Dyche effect, right? So if he plays consistently, I don't doubt he'll be in the points, especially like the home fixtures and like Leicester away. I think we'll get some joy there. If he's playing Bournemouth at home, I think he'll get some joy. The worry is I don't think he's going to get those consistent minutes personally. I think he'll get I think he'll get City. Brentford, I couldn't say with 100% certainty right now. And then going forward, it's Trossard, Martinelli in a dogfight each week. I think they're going to be up against each other.
And I think for me, like, I'm someone who I am considering taking a hit, a -4, to move Martinelli on to one of Saka or Odegaard. I don't really want to make that move to Odegaard. I know he's got more expected minutes, but firstly, we've got to wait to see the presses and see how that knock impacted him, which he got subbed off with. And secondly, I just think Saka is the best Arsenal asset.
Me too.
And I'm not going to wildcard anytime soon. And I think someone did some calculations on one of the algorithms, make of models what you want, but they said that they looked at a -4 hit from Martinelli to Odegaard, and the model said it would take 6 weeks to pay back the hit. They did a Martinelli to Saka, and it would take 3 weeks to pay back the hit. So I do definitely think, just if money's not a problem, and especially if you can do it for a free transfer, you've already got free City, you've already got free Arsenal, you can get to 25 the blank and resolve your situation there as well with the teams not playing. I am very jealous of anyone who's got free Arsenal, free City, and can, in one free transfer this week with no hit, go straight from Martinelli to Saka, because I think
that's what
that is like an ideal move. Yeah, like that. If I could do that, then I will be doing that. So that's something I'm going to just monitor throughout the week. I'll let you know how I get on with my thinking on that. But I just don't think that. Like, one of the things I always ask myself is, would I pay the price that a player is now? So I've been looking at Martinelli as a 6 million asset because that's the price I paid for him then. He has dropped a few times recently in price. I can still sell him for 6.3 million because he's 6.6 million now. But I asked myself, would I pay 6.6 million for Martinelli now with that expected minutes threat? I don't think I would. I'd pay like 7 more for Odegaard and have more guaranteed minutes. So with that in mind, and with the fact I want them for the long term, this Arsenal player, because they don't blank in 25 or 28, the last thing I want is to go into 25 or 28 and Martinelli doesn't start because I didn't take this hit now proactively and, make up the points. I guess just there's one question from Mike, and then let's get out of here. We're at the hour mark. So he just said, do you think the City investigation will be a distraction or fuel to the fire for City for the remainder of the season? He reckons it could be a huge distraction.
I'm with Mike. I think mentally they're in such a weird spot, and like tactically you can see they're a bit off. They look very laboured. And you said it earlier about the amount of people wanting to leave. I think this could really derail, is going to come back and bite me. But so I'm just going to say I'm with Mike. I think it could be a huge distraction.
I think it is. I remember Pep gave a quote about a year ago where he said, if the club have lied to me about the finances, I will leave.
Let's see if he sticks to his word, right?
Yeah, so let's see what comes out. But yeah, so this was good fun. It's obviously never enjoyable losing, but it was nice to just talk it through with you and have a reasonable conversation and get both our perspectives, because as we say, like, the pod is always great because it just feels like we can just chat about the Arsenal.
Free therapy,
right? Yeah, exactly. It's like, instead of paying a therapist, we can take out the stress of our loss together.
Even from the good side of things, though, like, it's so not, I think that for me was one of the reasons starting this up, right? Like, when you're in the pub with your mates, you never go into the detail like you can on here. It's just like a blank canvas to be able to kind of go into absolute every detail on your football club that you love, which I don't think you can do in everyday conversation. And just to kind of wrap up, I think, like, one thing, Everton for me was a blip. I think, like I said earlier, I've seen people on Twitter saying we need to, what I said about in that game, I would have made a sub that tweaked the system. I've seen people saying they would start with Tierney on set. Like, I don't think we need to be doing anything mental. I think this was a blip against a manager who's very, very well good. He's very good defensively at drilling his teams and stuff. And I think we'll be all right. I think it's a blip. It's okay to admit that we were well beat. It's happened twice. Like, that's it. Onwards and upwards.
Yep. And thanks everyone who tuned in live. We really appreciate you guys tuning in and coming and just being interactive in the chat and making it feel like a two-way conversation. If you're watching on video on demand or on podcast and you're not subscribed, we'd really appreciate a subscription. Well, I think we're on 147 subs, so just 3 away from 150. So if you've enjoyed the show, if we've made you smile or laugh, or we've been there to console you with the loss, please do consider subscribing and hearing about the next episodes coming out. We will be back to obviously do a preview of this Brentford game later in the week, I think on Friday lunchtime. Hopefully we'll know more about Odegaard's fitness in the presser. We can also find out a little bit more about what we think about Martinelli's expected minutes and whether that hit I'm condoning is something I'm actually going to do. So don't go take the hit yet, guys. Wait to see what I might do. For all you know, Bruno gets a season-ending injury tomorrow night for Man United. And suddenly it's an easy move from Bruno to Saka, Martinelli to Mahrez. And we're there. So don't make your moves early is all I'm going to say. But thank you, guys. As I say, if you enjoyed it, hit that like, subscribe, and we will see you on Friday. In the meantime, up the Arsenal. And long may this title challenge continue, hopefully.
Just a blip. Onwards and upwards. Up the Arsenal. Come on.
Up the Arsenal.